They say that after a certain age, we stop looking for new things and start looking for meaning. I've spent a lifetime traveling, but I realized I was still missing something. So I packed my bags once more and traveled thousands of miles across the ancient heart of China. Not for the cities or the crowds, but for the silence that remains in places time forgot. From the mystical peaks of Fanjing to the endless whispers of the inner Mongolian grasslands, this journey led me into a side of China most people never truly see. Today, I want to share with you 22 wonders that reminded me why the world is still worth exploring. It's never too late to be amazed. Let's begin this journey together. Mount Fanjing feels like a separate world set above the valleys, where cloud and forest trade places by the hour. Locals know it as a sacred mountain, but its quiet details are what linger. In Mount Fanjing, Tongren, Guizhou Province, China, steep slopes shelter a deep green band of subtropical broadleaf forest. In 2018, it was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its rare ecology. The mountain's isolation has protected species found in few other parts of China, including the Guizhou snub-nosed monkey. Old-growth trees, mosses, and ferns hold moisture even when nearby ridgelines turn dry. Stone stairways and cliffside paths thread upward past small temples and incense smoke still used by pilgrims. The climb can take hours, and the air cools noticeably as the forest thins. What stays most vivid is the red cloud's golden summit, two narrow rock towers, each capped with a small temple. Between them, a slim stone bridge spans the gap, suspended over open air. Icon Spring sits in a wide, spare landscape where the ground looks bleached and the horizon feels unusually open. Here in Icon Spring, Kaidam Basin, Qinghai Province, China, the desert basin holds salt flats, wind-sculpted gravel, and the distant silhouettes of low mountains. Even in daylight, the air can seem dry enough to thin every sound. The spring itself is small, but it changes the scene immediately, adding moisture, mineral scent, and a soft haze close to the surface. Travelers in Qinghai often describe it less as a pool and more as a strange feature set into the earth. Minerals carried up from underground stain the surrounding ground in layered tones, rust red, ochre, and pale tan, like a natural diagram of chemistry. Along the edges, crusty deposits harden into irregular rims that crunch underfoot. This corner of Western China is known for extremes: high elevation, strong sun, and long distances between settlements. Yet beneath that hard surface, geothermal heat keeps water moving, even when the land looks inactive. What stays with you is the spring's intensely blue center, a clear, eye-like circle set against chalky salt and iron-stained earth. Yungang Pass sits in a high notch of northern Shanxi, where the mountains narrow and travel becomes a single, deliberate line. The terrain itself explains why this corridor has been guarded for so long. Known as Yungang Pass, Dai County, Xinzhou, Shanxi Province, China, it marks a strategic opening between ridges that once separated farming valleys from open steppe country. In clear weather, the view stretches over tawny slopes and scattered villages. The main fortress complex is built to control movement, rather than impress from afar. Walls follow the contours, and gates appear where the land naturally funnels. Stone paving underfoot still carries the logic of patrols, carts, and careful foot traffic. Around the pass, sections of the Great Wall thread along the crest lines, sometimes intact, sometimes broken into low, weathered runs of masonry. Watchtowers perch on high points, spaced to keep sightlines across the folds of the hills. Even in today's quiet, the place feels engineered for vigilance. Sound carries and wind arrives abruptly through the gap. Light shifts quickly as clouds slide over the ridges and the valley floor darkens. Most distinctive is the tight mountain cleft, where successive stone gate towers stand one behind another, turning a natural bottleneck into a controlled passage. Huke Waterfall sits on the Yellow River, where the current meets a hard edge of rock, and the sound carries across the open valley. It's best known as Huku Waterfall, border of Shanxi Province and Shanxi Province, China. Here, the Loess Plateau looks soft from a distance, but its cliffs and terraces are cut sharply by seasonal rain and wind. The river runs the same corridor that has shaped northern China's farms, towns, and sediment-heavy waterways for thousands of years. The waterfall changes character with the calendar. Summer floods widen the flow, while winter cold can lace the edges with ice. In calmer months, you can see the river's muddy color settle into bands as it presses against the banks. On both sides, footpaths and viewing platforms cling to the gorge, and local drivers follow extreme roads carved into the plateau's slopes. Small villages nearby still work with the river's silt-rich soil, raising apples and grains where the land allows. Mist rises from the impact zone and hangs low, dampening the stone rails and darkening the canyon walls. The air smells of wet earth, and the river's grit can be felt on your lips when the wind turns. What stays with you is the way the broad yellow river abruptly funnels into a narrow, spout-like cleft, concentrating all that brown water into one tight, pounding chute. Yungang Grottoes sits along a sandstone ridge outside Datong, its weathered openings cut into the earth like windows to another century. The surrounding plain in northern China feels spare, almost austere, which makes the carved cliff seem even more improbable. Known fully as Yungang Grottoes, Datong, Shanxi Province, China, the site was shaped in the 5th and 6th centuries under the Northern Wei dynasty. Buddhism was gaining influence across China's northern frontiers, and stone became the medium for devotion and statecraft alike. Inside more than 40 major caves, ceilings arch over pillar-like cores, and walls carry dense layers of reliefs. Alongside serene Buddhas are musicians, guardians, lotus patterns, and quiet, everyday details etched with patient control. Some figures show hints of Central Asian style that traveled across China's inland routes, then settled into distinctly Chinese forms. Faces soften, robes fall in rhythmic folds, and the iconography gradually shifts toward later traditions seen across the country. Wind, freeze-thaw cycles, and coal-era pollution around Datong have left scars on the stone, so conservation work is constant and meticulous. Walkways keep visitors moving, but the caves still feel intimate, cooled by rock and shadow. The most striking sight remains the sheer scale, a long cliff face crowded with thousands of carved figures, including several monumental Buddhas, all emerging directly from tawny sandstone. Tianshan National Park sits in China's northeast, where mountain stone and temple roofs share the same skyline. A short drive from the industrial city nearby, the scenery turns unexpectedly intricate and quiet. Known locally as the Thousand Mountains, Tianshan National Park, Anshan, Liaoning Province, China, is a compact maze of granite ridges, narrow saddles, and steep stairways. Weathered rock faces hold pockets of soil where pines cling and twist in the wind. Footpaths move between natural lookout points and centuries-old religious sites, reflecting the long overlap of Buddhism and Taoism in this region. Some halls sit in shallow coves of stone, protected from harsh winter gusts. In warmer months, mist can soften the sharp outlines, and streams briefly appear along the gullies after rain. Cable cars and cliffside steps offer different ways to read the same terrain, from close texture to broad pattern. Even the park's small details feel engineered by time: split boulders, balanced slabs, and ledges worn smooth by countless footsteps. From certain angles, the mountains seem less like a range and more like clustered spires. What lingers most is that density, the way serrated granite peaks pack tightly together, creating a near-continuous wall of stone, as if the landscape decided to fold 1,000 small mountains into one place. Zhangye National Geopark sits at the edge of the Hexi Corridor in northwestern China, where dry air and open sky give the land an unusually clear outline. Known more fully as Zhangye National Geopark, Zhangye, Gansu Province, China, it protects a rare Danxia landscape shaped from layered sandstone and siltstone laid down over millions of years. Those layers were folded and lifted, then patiently carved by wind, frost, and occasional rain into rounded ridges, steep fins, and shallow valleys. The terrain looks carefully arranged, yet it's the slow math of erosion. Color is the detail visitors remember. Iron-rich beds lean red and rust, while other minerals tilt toward yellow, gray, and greenish tones. Under strong sun, the stripes sharpen. Under haze, and they soften into pastels. Boardwalks and viewing platforms guide people across fragile ground, keeping foot traffic off the crumbly slopes. Even from these paths, the scale is hard to judge, like a hydroplanet pressed into a single basin. Around Zhangye, oasis fields and poplar windbreaks mark where water can be managed, but the park itself stays mostly bare, letting rock and light do the work. Silence carries easily here. What stays with you is the rainbow banding itself. Tight, parallel ribbons of red, ochre, and ash-gray sediment, wrapping each hill like paint, laid directly into the stone. Huangqing Shangfu sits in the hills above Jincheng, its stone walls and courtyards laid out with the measured confidence of an old northern estate. Built and expanded by the Chen family, it carries the imprint of scholars who served in the imperial system. In Huangqing Shangfu, Jincheng, Shanxi Province, China, the first impression is order. Layered gates, high ramparts, and narrow lanes that bend between grey brick residences. The layout feels defensive without losing the rhythm of daily life, from kitchens and wells to study rooms set deeper inside. Shanxi's long tradition of courtyard architecture is everywhere here, but this complex reads like a small, fortified town. Look for the watchtowers and the careful placement of doorways, and designed to control movement while keeping family spaces sheltered from winter wind and summer dust. Details reward a slow pace. Carved stonework at thresholds, wooden screens, and inscriptions that hint at Confucian learning and local pride. Beyond the walls, the upland landscape of southeastern Shanxi frames the site in muted earth tones. What stays with you most is the honeycomb of courtyards, one after another, each a quiet pocket of light and shade held within thick grey walls. A high lake sits quietly beside the old city of Dali, its wide surface catching the soft highland light of western Yunnan. Locals have long called it an ear sea, a name that fits both its shape and its calm temperament. In Erhai Lake, Dali, Yunnan Province, China, fresh water spreads across a plateau more than 6,000 feet above sea level, framed by the long ridge of the Kangshan Mountains. Breezes funnel down the slopes and skim the water, turning the shoreline into a changing map of ripples. Seasonal clouds gather quickly here, shading patches of water while sunlight breaks through in narrow bands. Photographers on Haida Planet often note how the lake can look silver one minute and slate blue the next. The day ends without fanfare, and the lake's most distinctive detail becomes clear. An ear-shaped sweep of water, curving gently at the shoreline, as if the landscape itself is listening. Dragon River Underground Cave lies within China's vast belt of karst country, where limestone has been quietly shaped for ages by rain and time. In Dragon River Underground Cave, China, that long work is hidden just beneath the surface. Getting close can mean threading mountain valleys and steep rural passes, the kind of extreme roads that still link small settlements to the wider province. Above ground, fields and forest give few hints of what water is doing below. Inside, the air cools and the ceiling lowers into chambers polished by moisture. Stalactites hang like mineral curtains, while flowstone spreads across ledges in pale, layered sheets. Sound becomes a guide as much as sight. Drips, distant splashes, and the soft echo of footsteps on damp rock. And the walls carry banded stains from past floods, marking seasons when the cave briefly filled and then drained again. In other parts of China's south, from the Tower Casts near Guila to river-cut gorges farther inland, the landscape shows the same chemistry on a grand scale. Here, the same forces are concentrated into tight corridors and sudden rooms. What stays with you is the river itself, a clear, steady ribbon running in darkness, disappearing around bends where the light can't reach. Its underground current is the cave's most distinctive feature, always moving, always audible. Pingyao Ancient City keeps time in brick and timber, a lived-in record of urban China that still feels organized by footsteps, courtyards, and gates. It sits in the heart of Pingyao Ancient City, Pingyao County, Jinzhong, Shanxi Province, China. Behind the great perimeter wall, narrow lanes thread past grey facades and carved wooden eaves, where shop signs hang low and courtyards open like small, private worlds. Even the street layout follows older logic, built for carts, markets, and neighbors who knew each other's routines. Pingyao also tells a quieter story about money. In the old banking compounds, thick doors and deep rooms hint at the rise of draft banks that helped merchants move wealth across provinces without hauling silver. Temples and halls punctuate the neighborhood grid, their roofs layered with dark tiles and ridge ornaments, with stone steles and incense burners worn smooth by generations. In the evening, lantern light turns corners soft, and the city seems to exhale. Outside the wall, modern Pingyao expands with wider roads and new apartments, yet the old city holds its proportions. The soundscape shifts from traffic to conversation, from engines to bicycle bells. Most distinctive of all is the nearly complete grey brick city wall itself, unbroken for kilometers, with crenellations and watchtowers that still trace a full, walkable ring around the town. Arksan National Forest Park sits along the upper reaches of the Yungang Mountains, where northern China turns quiet and green. The air often carries a resin scent from larch and spruce, even in midsummer. In Arksan National Forest Park, Yungang League, Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, China, the terrain tells a volcanic story without much fanfare. Old lava flows and basalt outcrops lie softened by moss, grasses, and long winters. Roads wind in from the town of Arksan through valleys that feel far from the usual pace of Inner Mongolia. Travelers who like to study maps may compare them to the world's most dangerous roads, but here, the curves are more about scenery than suspense. Crater lakes appear like dark mirrors between ridgelines, and their shorelines edged with pumice and stone. On still days, the water holds the reflection of cloud layers as cleanly as glass. In colder months, snow settles in deep drifts, muting footsteps and turning the forest into a study in black, white, and evergreen. Even so, certain spots stay stubbornly warm. Near the geothermal springs, mineral-rich water threads through channels beside the trees, and thin steam lifts steadily into the cold air. That quiet plume, warmth visible among conifers, is the park's most distinctive signature. Hulunbuir grassland stretches across China's northern edge in a sweep of open country that feels wider than the map suggests. Seen from ground level, the land is mostly sky, wind, and grass, with distances measured by the slow drift of clouds. In Hulunbuir grassland, Hulunbuir, Inner Mongolia, Autonomous Region, China, summer arrives quickly, and with it, a soft green tide. The growing season is short, so every warm day matters, and the steppe responds all at once. Around the wetlands and low basins, pools form and hold mirror-like reflections at dawn. Herds move between these watered pockets and the drier uplands, following routes learned over generations. Near Hulun Lake, the air can shift from dry prairie to a cooler, reed-scented breeze in minutes. Farther north, the Erguna River threads through meadows and willow edges, drawing birds into the open. Life here is built for motion: portable felt gears, grazing schedules, and fences that appear only where the land needs a gentle boundary. Even the roads feel temporary, narrow lines through a place that prefers to stay unbroken. On the horizon, the Greater Khingan Range sits like a dark seam, reminding you that forests are close yet held back. Most days, though, the grassland keeps the spotlight, changing color with sun angle and passing weather. Forbidden City sits at the historic heart of Beijing, a place once closed to nearly everyone except the imperial household. Today, Forbidden City, Beijing, China, still feels carefully measured, as if every step has been planned in advance. Built in the early 1400s, and used through the Ming and Qing dynasties, the complex is less a single palace than a walled city of courtyards, halls, gates, and side lanes. It's one of the largest preserved palace compounds on the planet, laid out with relentless symmetry. Vermilion walls, white stone terraces, and golden roof tiles repeat in variations that reward slow looking. Dragons curl across beams and brackets, while carved balustrades guide the eye towards ceremonial platforms where authority was once staged. Walk its central axis, and the spaces widen and tighten like controlled breathing. Outer courts for public ritual, inner quarters for private routine. Even the paving stones seem chosen for how they carry footsteps and rain. Beyond the gates, Beijing continues in layers. Hutong lanes, museums, and parks that trace older city lines. From nearby Jingshan, the rooftops read like a carefully stacked field of color and geometry. Most distinctive is the broad moat that encircles the walls, a still band of water that holds the whole city within a city at a deliberate distance. Heaven Lake sits in the high caldera of an old volcano, where weather can change in minutes, and the air feels noticeably thinner. Locals also know it as Tianqi, a name that hints at its long-held reverence. Here, at Heaven Lake, Changbai Mountain, Jilin Province, China, the rim forms a natural amphitheater of rock and cloud. On clear mornings, the water appears suddenly between the slopes, like a window cut into the summit. The lake was shaped by a massive eruption more than 1,000 years ago, leaving steep walls that drop toward deep, cold water. Even in summer, wind skims the surface and keeps the temperature low. Downhill, forests of Korean pine, spruce, and birch spread across the reserve, and wooden walkways protect fragile ground cover. Not far away, warm springs send thin ribbons of steam into the cool mountain air. Wildlife is shy but present. Birds move through the tree line, and tracks sometimes appear in damp soil after rain. In winter, snow and ice reshape every contour, and roads can close without much warning. Mianshan Mountain settles into the landscape west of Taiyuan, a long ridge whose stone walls and forested folds have drawn pilgrims for centuries. Here, in Mianshan Mountain, Jinjiang, Shanxi Province, China, roads give way to stairways, and quiet courtyards appear where the slope briefly softens. The air often carries a dry, resinous scent from pines that hold fast to thin soil. The mountain is closely linked to the story of Jia Zitui, a loyal retainer remembered across China during the cold food tradition, and the sites around him are treated with a careful, almost restrained reverence. Stone tablets and carved inscriptions let history speak in plain, durable characters. Buddhist and Taoist spaces share the ridge without sharp boundaries. Incense halls, small pagoda-like towers, and bell sounds that travel further than voices. Between them, narrow paths trace the contours of the rock, sometimes slipping into shaded ravines where water gathers after rain. Much of Mianshan's architecture feels engineered to disappear into the mountain. Stairs wedged into cracks, platforms balanced on ledges, roofs angled to shed winter snow. Even a brief pause can reveal how deliberately each structure yields to the terrain. Mount Wutai feels less like a single mountain than a high, open landscape shaped by long weather and patient time. In northern China, its altitude brings clean air and sudden shifts in light across the ridgelines. Known fully as Mount Wutai, Xinzhou, Shanxi Province, China, it has drawn pilgrims for centuries, and the routes still follow old contours of valley and pass. Bells and incense drift from temple courtyards tucked among pines. The mountain's cultural map is dense. Stairways, stone bridges, prayer halls, and small villages that settle into the folds of the terrain. In winter, snow gathers along roofs and eaves, softening lines that were once sharp. Reaching the higher ground can mean tight turns and long climbs, and the kind of approach people file away under extreme roads, dangerous places. Yet once you arrive, the pace changes, and the plateau air quiets the mind without asking for it. Wildflowers appear in brief summer windows, while clouds slide in low and close, brushing treetops and temple walls. Even on busy days, there are pockets of silence behind a gate or beside a cold stone step. What sets Mount Wutai apart is right in its name. 5 broad, terrace-like summits, remarkably flat and often treeless, laid out like natural platforms above the forests. Baiyangdian Lake sits low on the North China Plain, a broad sheet of fresh water stitched with channels and shallow bays. In Baiyangdian Lake, Xiong'an New Area, Hebei Province, China, the shoreline doesn't always feel like an edge because water threads deep into the land. Villages and docks appear where you expect fields. Boats move through corridors of lotus and reeds, following routes that seem to change with the season and the wind. In summer, the surface can look quietly crowded, green and pink, laid over dark water. This wetland has long been used for fishing and small-scale farming, with footbridges, nets, and low piers set close to the waterline. Life here is measured by depth, ice, and the timing of blooms. Nearby, and the planned city of Xiong'an is reshaping the region, and the lake's health has become a central concern. Restoration work focuses on clearer water and steadier habitat for birds and aquatic plants. Even by the standards of China's famous landscapes, it belongs among the impossible places, less a single view than a whole geography made of pathways. You navigate it by sound, by reed color, by the feel of open water returning. What stays with you is the reed sea itself, tall, dense, and continuous, turning Baiyangdian into a living maze of green walls that sway and whisper at arm's length. Baishishan's scenic area lies along the northern edge of the Taihang Mountains, where pale stone and dark pine share the same high, cool air. In Baishishan's scenic area, Laiyuan County, Baoding, Hebei Province, China, paths thread through a landscape shaped by ancient uplift and long erosion, leaving narrow ridgelines and sudden drop-offs. The scale feels close up and immense at the same time. Cable cars and cliffside walkways bring visitors into the mid-heights, where wind moves through Chinese pine and small shrubs that cling to cracks in the rock. On clear days, the view opens over layered slopes and scattered villages far below. Temples and pavilions appear at turns in the trail, set where builders found the rare flat ledge or sheltered corner. Even in summer, a shade can be thin, and the mountain's exposed faces hold the sun like a reflector. Mist is common here, softening the outlines and turning ridges into silhouettes, then clearing to reveal their sharp geometry again. A single step can shift the scene from forested calm to open sky. What stays with you is the mountain's white stone itself, broad, chalk-bright cliffs that catch daylight and seem to glow against the green roof of the pines. Genghis Khan Mausoleum sits on the broad Ordos Plateau, where desert light meets open grassland in northern China. Its calm courtyards feel far removed from the speed of modern travel. Known formally as Genghis Khan Mausoleum, Ordos, Inner Mongolia, Autonomous Region, China, the complex is less a tomb than a ceremonial memorial. Tradition holds that the Khan's burial place remains unknown, guarded by silence and distance. Pilgrims arrive across sandy highways from Hohhot Baotu and the bends of the Yellow River. Some come after long drives that rival the world's most dangerous roads in fatigue, if not in cliffs. Architecture here blends museum order with step symbolism. Wide plazas, yurt-inspired halls, and deep eaves that cast steady shade. And incense and butter lamps soften the air, even when wind pushes grit across the stones. Exhibits trace nomadic life, saddles, armor, and carved silver, alongside accounts of the Ordos region's shifting borders and livelihoods. Outside, the landscape stays spare, low shrubs, pale sand, and a sky that feels unusually close. In the central sanctuary, the most distinctive presence is not a body, but the Sulda, horsehair spirit banners, linked to Genghis Khan, standing quietly in dim light. Ming tombs rest in a broad, quiet valley north of Beijing, where imperial planning meets the contours of the land. Ming tombs, Changping District, Beijing, China, feels less like a single monument than a carefully arranged landscape of power and afterlife. "13 Ming emperors were placed here, each tomb set apart, yet bound to the same geography of low hills, streams, and open fields. The site follows feng shui logic, with the Tianshu Mountains forming a protective backdrop and the plain opening south toward the old capital. Approach begins on the Sacred Way, a processional route designed to slow the body and focus the mind. Along it stand carved guardians, lions, camels, elephants, and solemn officials, weathered into personalities like a hydroplanet of stone, presences hiding in plain sight. Shh. At Dingling, one emperor's burial complex descends into an underground palace of arched chambers and heavy doors. The cool, enclosed rooms hint at what remains sealed elsewhere, as most tombs are protected by leaving them undisturbed. In the end, what stays with you is the Sacred Way itself, that long, straight corridor of stone animals and statues facing forward in patient, unblinking silence. Qiantang River threads past Hangzhou with the calm confidence of a working waterway carrying silt, barges, and city reflections toward the sea. Here, at Qiantang River, Hangzhou Bay, Zhejiang Province, China, the coastline narrows into a wide funnel that gathers the pull of the ocean. The shape looks ordinary on a map, but it behaves like an instrument tuned for motion. Twice a day, tides press into the bay and meet the river's outward flow, stacking energy into a moving front. Mudflats, sandbars, and shifting channels help steer that force into a single direction. In nearby towns such as Yangguan, people time their visits by the lunar calendar, listening for the first low roar. Seawalls and viewing platforms keep the scene close, yet safely framed. The river surface can change in minutes, from rippled brown water to a tightened, shining band that travels faster than a person can run. Even the air seems to thicken with spray and grit as the leading edge approaches. Around Hangzhou Bay, bridges, docks, and levees stand as reminders that this is an industrial estuary, not a wilderness. Still, the river keeps its own schedule, indifferent to traffic and daily routines. What sets the Qiantang apart is its tidal bore, a long, audible wall of water that charges upstream, folding the bay's sea into the river in one sustained, relentless surge. As the sun sets on these 22 wonders, I'm reminded that the world doesn't get smaller as we get older. It only gets deeper. These places taught me that beauty isn't just something you see. It's something you feel in the stillness of your heart. Thousands of miles later, I've realized that the greatest discovery wasn't the landscapes themselves, but the peace they brought back to my soul. But what about you? Is there a place you've always dreamed of visiting? Or a memory from your travels that still stays with you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey touched your heart, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who still believes in the magic of the world. Thank you for traveling with me. Until next time, keep exploring. And remember, your next great adventure is just a heartbeat away.